Do we have too much government?
We need to put people ahead of corporate profits.
This system is so lopsided.
This threat is a real threat to democracy.
And I think that's really important. That's something we haven't been doing in this country for a long time.
Where do you start? What do you do? How do you do it?
Access to Democracy and other Eagan community television programming is supported by Thomson Reuters, makers of Westlaw Next and based in Eagan. Through Westlaw Next and other innovative online services, Thomson Reuters is the world's leading source of intelligent information for businesses and professionals. Online at thomsonreuters.com. And by U.S. Federal Credit Union, the member-owned financial institution offering service, value, and experience you can trust to the greater Twin Cities community.
Welcome. We're back with Access to Democracy and a guest with backbone and courage, one of the few Republicans who will really join us here. Our former committee person, our former mayor, commissioner of 2 departments in the state government, state auditor, Pat Anderson. It's always a pleasure to have you back.
I guess I'm the gutsy Republican.
You
right?
are the gutsy Republican. It was always my opinion that had you won the Republican nomination, Republicans would have done much better than they did with legislator Emmer. But that was just my own personal
Well, everybody
opinion.
has an opinion, right? So, I was happy to run for auditor again. So.
And it's a lot of fun. The funny thing is, every time people learn that I'm having you on the progressive left, they jump all over me. And they say, why are you having her on? She's so right-wing, she's so radical. I had somebody yesterday say, tell her she should just forget politics and stick to putting her recipes in USA Weekend every week.
My recipes?
And I said, she doesn't put recipes
No.
in USA Weekend. And he said, yes, she does. You look in there and you'll see. So when I got home last night, I Googled, and there is a Pam Anderson who puts recipes every week in the USA Weekend.
Well, I should go look because I'm always looking for recipes
So
since I don't cook very often. So, Alan.
That's what I heard.
No, that's not me. But Pat Anderson's, you know how many there are in Minnesota? I don't know. There's got to be.
I found that out yesterday.
5,000 Pat Andersons in
Yes,
Minnesota.
indeed.
Yep,
So.
yep. It's probably the most common
But
name.
Anyway, nice to have you back.
Thanks for having
And,
me. Thanks.
Now, you described yourself as a libertarian Republican, which is really to the crazies of the Republicans. It's to the right. What do you?
Well, it's it depends on how you look at it. I mean, that's the whole thing. There's a sort of a new alignment in politics, and I think there is within the Republican Party too. And the Libertarian Republicans tend to really emphasize liberty and freedom from government in general, but also just freedom to make your own decisions and chart your own path in life. And so it's there's a lot of, I guess, the Tea Party Republicans, a lot of the Tea Party folks who really were never involved in politics before.
Keep government out of my life.
Keep government out of my life.
Don't take my Medicare away.
Well, right. So, but I think it's different than you had your old business Republicans years ago, and they're considered the moderates now, right? Where they're sort of government and business aligned.
Jacob Javits is turning over in his grave.
Yeah.
John Lindsay is turning over in his grave.
Yeah. And then I think you had for a while, you had the heavy social conservatives, and not that I'm not, but the emphasis was on social issues for a while in the party, and I think the new emphasis in the party is more of a libertarian Republican, which is really more of an emphasis on fiscal issues, size of government, again, individuals making their own decisions, and government not being a nanny to people.
I was just going
and I think that's a majority viewpoint. I really
my
do.
first question that I had written in my notes is, what is government's obligation to its citizens? in your view?
It's to, I mean, it's broad, but it's to protect your rights, I think, first and foremost. I think there's an obligation to provide infrastructure. The thing where we all debate is what is infrastructure, right? Is it simply, roads and sewer system and this sort of thing? Or is it also the social safety net that I think people on the left would argue is part of infrastructure?
You include me on
I
the
would
left?
include you on that, Alan.
That's
I watched your introduction earlier, and there weren't any Republicans in your introduction. So maybe you're right. Maybe that's the and
That's
one of
because
the
they're
few
afraid to
that show
come
up,
on.
that show up.
As a matter of fact, we were looking for your interview to put you up there, and we couldn't find that DVD.
I've been killed after.
You would have been, replacing Amy Klobuchar.
No, I
But,
don't think so. So I think there's an obligation to it's to protect public safety. I think that's there. It's to provide infrastructure, to provide the rule of law, which
How
is
about health?
I don't think there is an obligation at all to provide health care.
Let the poor just wither away on the vine.
Well, we have. I mean, that's the debate. I mean, there's what do you provide? Do you provide health care? Do you provide welfare? Do you provide education? Clearly, there's a constitutional obligation to provide education. But things like health care, welfare, those things have been added, and they're not in our Constitution. They're not in anything that we originally did. They're part of this whole social service.
How far would you go
safety
with
net.
education?
Well, I'm a voucher person. I mean,
Why am I not surprised?
there is an obligation for the state to provide for, I don't remember the exact terminology, but to provide for the education of its citizens. But it doesn't say how. It doesn't say it has to be done through,
So we can
a
take-
monopoly
we can
of
take
government or government-run
The
schools
well-to-do
versus-
children, and we can suck them out of the system and have their parents put them in private schools where
Oh, hang on,
the
because that's not how
public
that is
schools
not how
will
voucher
suffer.
system works, Alan. In fact, right now, most of the charter schools and things are actually serving at-risk populations. They're serving sort of the opposite.
And
of
interestingly enough, the statistics on the charter schools indicate that the public schools are doing a little bit better than the charter schools.
Well, because they're serving at-risk populations. And I'm not opposed to public schools per se, but I think we need to have all sorts of different options. Parents should be able to have options, and frankly, from a betterment of our society standpoint, shall we say, we should have competition, and not just amongst schools, but amongst ways of educating. We haven't
how about-
changed what we do
How
in
do
a
we get
long,
the
long
poor?
time.
How do we get the poor
Because it's an
and the
equal.
underprivileged to the point where they can be competitive unless we provide them with the necessaries? And I just said this to Dane Smith, when the poorest among us suffers, we all suffer, because if we don't
Absolutely.
give, for instance, preschool education to the children of really impoverished or first-generation Americans, they don't do as well. And along the line, where do they end up? They end up in trouble. They end up dropping out of school. To
Well,
me, we have an obligation in that regard.
First-generation Americans actually do very well. If you look at, historically, and certainly with the
Which
Asians.
population? If you're looking at the Asian population,
Absolutely, they do
because of their
fantastically.
ethic.
Fantastically, right. And so that's the better question. Is it the system or is it the ethics, of the culture that they come from?
But if
Whatever that
if their
happens
culture
to be.
doesn't provide it, then I think that society has an obligation to do it, because what we want and what made this country great is bringing together all these diverse people. And I mean,
And we did not
you've-
have
you've been-
the public school system the way
I mean,
we
your
have. We
ancestors
had-
have been here since.
Well, most of them, 1800s. And
Yeah.
they all came over
Yeah.
as absolutely impoverished farmers, and they tried to grow onions and potatoes in the rocks in northern Minnesota. I don't know why they picked northern Minnesota, but that's where they came from.
That's
Yeah.
why they needed a little bit better education on farming. But,
Well, and the other thing that was different, and my grandparents talk about this because their parents were the immigrants, so my great-grandparents, but they would not allow my grandparents to speak, non-English in their home. They absolutely insisted that they integrate with the culture, that they learn the
Good for
language.
them.
And that was the way it was then, and we're not doing that now. New immigrant families aren't doing that.
That's right.
And we're not pushing that.
And what is it
You know, we're
result in?
spending millions of dollars. Yeah, oofta. But we're spending huge sums of money to translate into, 50 different languages when the goal should be to assimilate people and have them speaking English. Now we're getting into a whole nother issue.
Not to pound
the
it
English
into the
only
head.
issue, I guess.
Let's talk about the controversies in Pat Anderson's life. at the
Pat
present
Anderson
time.
always has controversies.
Not always. You didn't used to have controversy
No.
when you were here in Egan.
No.
And I remember you standing in Waders during the 80-year flood or whatever it was, and in which we
Helping-
actually lost a life in that one.
Yeah, we did.
And
we did. Yeah.
things
yeah.
like that.
Yep.
You didn't have controversies back then. Now you have become a lobbyist for Racino
And others.
and others. Well, I didn't know about the others even. Who else do we lobby for?
I work with the Minnesota Free Market Institute, which of course I used to be the president of that organization before the last campaign. And there's new presidents, Kim Crockett, and I'm working with them, representing them at the legislature on issues like pension reform, anti-Obamacare, health
Which
care,
means
public pension reform.
I hate when people call it Obamacare rather than national health care.
It's just sort of
Because-
ingrained in the language
so
of the right, Adam.
The language of Fox News, or as I call them, Fox Noise, but irresponsible journalism, yellow journalism. In fact, they are probably a glowing shade of yellow journalism, but we won't get into that.
CNN,
But
yeah.
why Racino?
Well, I have long been I work for Canterbury Park, by the way, not for the Racino Now, which encompasses all the tracks. So it's specifically Canterbury Park. But when I was state auditor, we actually passed this in 2003 through the Republican House. Governor Plenty supported it, and I supported it as auditor. And I've long been an advocate for breaking up monopolies, frankly. One thing that's unique about Minnesota is that the tribes who have a monopoly on casino gambling do not pay any taxes. We are the only state in the nation where the tribes aren't taxed. And it's because we wrote this compact. When I say we, it was done by Democrats under Rudy Perpich, and when they controlled the legislature in the very late 80s. And
They
there's
do make substantial contributions, however, to their society, not only to
Well, I
their
would
own,
hope so.
to their not only to
Sure.
their own people, but to the communities that they're in, Prior Lake and places
well,
like that.
they do, and then it depends on where they're at. So Mystic is where the money is at, frankly, and the members of the tribes there get, I think, over $1 million a year tax-free in income, and that's incredible. Year after year after year after year by being a member of a tribe.
Of course, this country was once the property of Native Americans.
Oh, I don't buy that.
We
I don't
took
buy
it
that.
over, we pushed them out, we stuck them on reservations. You look at the people in the Dakotas, who are, for the most part, some of the most poverty-stricken people in the entire country. Why? Because we came in, which is, I guess, the American way, since we're doing it in
Alan,
other
it's the way of
countries now.
humanity. It's the way of humanity. I mean,
It's,
if you look at the human
This
race
is-
over all of time,
we
have
have become
always,
nation builders,
that's-
but that is nation unbuilding.
what's
they never
nation
got-
unbuilding?
Taking a country away from an indigenous people and
Alan,
taking
throughout
it over.
human history, people have moved around, and that is just absolute human history. And yes,
throughout human
the entire
history,
South America
people
was
have
this
committed
way.
genocides and holocausts.
All of
That doesn't make it
Australia was
right.
This way. All of well, okay. Well,
Australia was populated by prisoners from England.
who came over and took over from the indigenous, was all originally the indigenous people, and even
But
parts of Europe. I mean,
they still have a better standard of living than a lot of our Native Americans in some of the reservations.
well, that
they're on.
may be true, and frankly, I mean, I think that just like my ancestors and everybody else's ancestors, at some point you have to integrate. I mean, that doesn't mean you lose your culture. I could still say oofta in my culture, and
You betcha.
but at some point you have to integrate because that's the way society is here. But we are the only state that in the nation, again, that does not have does not tax tribal casinos, and we hardly regulate them. There's less than $100,000 a year spent to regulate $1.5 billion industry in the state of Minnesota.
So let's take some of that money
That's it.
and put it
can't.
into Racino,
Well, the
which is what?
Well, what Racino
Gambling
is
in Canterbury?
Yeah, what Racino is but we passed, I think it was a constitutional amendment in, I think it was the 80s, that allowed the state to regulate horse racing tracks and to do betting, and that's how it started. And that was passed by the people, and so that's how Canterbury Downs, it was originally, came to be, and then eventually the one in the northern suburbs also is. And then they were allowed to do cards. So if you go down to Canterbury Park, you have horse racing, you have blackjack, you have all the card games, you have everything there except for slot machines. And because the state has not allowed them to add slot machines. The Racino bill essentially says, okay, you can add slot machines, but the state's going to get a huge cut of the dollars. They're going to pay, a huge tax rate to the state. It's completely regulated. It essentially makes them competitors, essentially, with the other 18 casinos that exist. But the difference is they're paying lots of taxes to cover public services. And I think
You've got that down pretty well.
Well,
You've been practicing this.
But that's the difference, and that's why if you look at the polls, there was a Trib poll that came out, just a week ago, that it's like 74% of people support this, and the numbers have always been there, because people are going to gamble, and they are. I mean,
Unfortunately, it's true, and usually the people that gamble are those who can least afford to gamble.
Well,
but,
I don't know. But the fact is that they're going to do it, and you can do it on the internet now, and there's 18 casinos in the state of Minnesota, and we have the lottery and everything else. And so you're not going to put that back into its box. I mean, there are some people in my party that would say we don't want any gambling at all.
That's very interesting that you say that, because your party really endorses state lottery and,
Well, yes, but
and,
not
and
everybody in
forms
the party.
of gambling. And yet they're attacking you, certainly a certain element of your party is attacking you for endorsing Racino at Canterbury. And it's been in the papers this last week. And in fact, the 8th Congressional District Executive Board on 5/3 says that Anderson obfuscated. I think that's very interesting that they were able to use a word like that on the right wing. Obfuscated,
hell it out. They are mad.
obfuscated the intent of the Minnesota GOP platform regarding expansion of gambling by Justin Critch, who was the deputy chair, who happens to sit on the board of
He does.
CAGE,
He's on the CAGE board.
which is a board supporting the Native Americans' exclusivity of
Well,
gambling.
here's the deal, and this has all come out.
Then we
in
have
the
Tony
last
Sutton and
last
Jack
couple weeks, yeah.
Meeks and Ted Lovedahl and
Well, Ted's not involved, but you have an organization called Citizens Against Gambling Expansion, okay, and they've been around for a while, and they lobby. They lobby
they're pretty
mostly
much
Republicans.
funded by the
Right, and they're run by some high-profile Republicans who get paid,
by the casinos,
but
basically.
they're actually funded by the Indians. Okay, brilliant strategy, by the way, right?
Indians
You've gotta-
get Republicans to work for them, which
right,
tells you
right.
that
But their job is to tell
pay them
people,
and ethics
social
go out the window.
conservatives, that gambling is bad and we shouldn't expand gambling. That's their job, and and so it works with a certain element of the party, except that it's well known now that they're funded by the Indians.
The ludicrous part of this, in terms of you, is that your platform doesn't oppose tribal gambling or state lotteries. And I say your platform, I mean the Republican platform.
Yeah, it
Of course, you
says the
haven't
Indians should-
completely become a libertarian yet.
Yes,
But
yes.
it does favor free market competition and opposes government barriers to trade, which would certainly seem to fly in the face of opposing Racino, to me.
It's contradictory, and people have come to that conclusion. We have one platform plank that says we don't support the expansion of gambling. Okay, then we have other platform planks that say we are opposed to the tribal monopoly on casinos, and they should pay taxes, by the way. That's in the platform, which we can't force them to do, although Governor Plenty tried that in '05. Then we have other ones that are against monopolies, others that are against, that's barriers to trade, which clearly says. So we have a very thick platform that's filled with all sorts of stuff that contradicts itself.
As are the heads of some of the people that are spouting some of this stuff. Thick. But,
Alan, no wonder you're not getting any Republicans on this show.
we tell it like it is. Let's get to some of the other things that have really bogged down this legislature. Gay marriage. Are you threatened by gay marriage?
Well, I think that
Should that be a constitutional
I
amendment?
think what the Republicans are saying is that we should vote on this and kind of have it done once and for all. And I don't know, there was a poll that came out
But we have a law
yesterday.
that says, in this state, we have a law that says
But Alan, you know that clearly
that there is no gay marriage.
We do.
What more do you
that's correct.
need?
But the
you feel-
judges,
do you
the
feel
judges
threatened
have regularly.
If two women get married or
regular-
two men get married, do you feel threatened?
Well, personally, I
You.
don't feel threatened, but I think that's an issue that people have to make a decision on, and it's going to
Should
be
it
voted
be
on.
a constitutional amendment?
It's
Is
going to be
that-
it's going to be on the ballot for people to be able
Oh,
to vote
you're
on.
being a good soldier. Voter ID in one of the safest voting states in the
Absolutely
country.
not the safest voting state.
Absolutely one
not.
of the best.
The
decision in the
we,
Franken
there
case
is voter ID
is being
in almost-
utilized by
in most states.
courts all over the country.
There's voter ID in most states. You've got to have some sort of form of ID. That's a regular thing. We have the most
So if you're
liberal
too old-
vouching laws.
if you're too old
Did you
to
know you
drive-
did you know that I could vouch for I can't remember the numbers. It's over 20 people. I could say, oh, I know them, and And we have had. After the '08 election, there was something
You
like
could,
18,000
but
postcards
how many
sent
people
out, Alan.
did?
18,000 postcards of people that were vouched for and registered on the same day with no ID, and were sent out to confirm it. Were sent back, no address.
And when
no
they
address.
investigated
Well, it was
them,
18,000 people.
when they
They
investigated
didn't
them,
investigate them. They've investigated the felon cases.
yeah, which in many
felon
cases,
Yep.
unfortunately, felons who had served their time were not told, in many cases, by
Well,
their probation
that's very
officers
possible.
that they couldn't vote.
That's very
So they went in
possible.
and voted in ignorance.
Yeah, that's very possible.
Especially if they
in
voted
some of the
for the
cases.
Republicans. That was definitely an ignorance.
Oh, they didn't vote for any Republicans. Felons do not support the Republican Party.
How about increasing taxes on the top? And this one hits close to home
yeah.
for you.
No,
On the
no.
top 1 or 2% of income, or
Well, here's the issue where I
face of
think that
this
Dayton
incredible
is wrong on this. He has been talking
you're talking about Dane Smith now, who
No, Dayton, Governor Dayton.
Oh, Dayton.
And Dayton,
I thought
Dayton
you-
may have, I didn't hear him, but I'm sure that he espouses the same line, so I'm sure he said it. But they have a tax incident study that's done by the Department of Revenue that's accurate. But what it looks at is what is your total burden of state and local taxes, all state and local. Now, first thing it doesn't do is it doesn't take into account your federal taxes. So if you were to take the federal taxes off of that number and then look at what you got left, the total burden, the high income, that's who pays all the federal taxes, and they pay a huge amount, and the numbers wouldn't be this way.
Minnesota
And-
is right in the middle of the country right now in terms of tax burden.
Yeah, yeah. I'm not
We're
disputing
not paying
that.
the highest.
Well, I don't know if
and
we're
we're
in the
paying-
middle.
and
I
we're
think
paying the
we're
lowest-
We're not in the top 10 anymore. We used to
That's
be in the top
right.
10, but we're not in the middle.
Well,
We're in
if you're
the-
below 10, you're in the middle. And in terms of federal taxes are the lowest that they have been
Yes.
in 30 or 40 years.
Yes, I agree, and that's because half the
And that's
people
with
don't
a-
pay any federal taxes.
And those
out.
are the people who
None.
can afford it because they're putting their money offshore in the Cayman
No,
Islands.
no, that's
or
not the case. But if you were to take federal taxes off people's income and then look at, okay, what do people pay in Minnesota? Those numbers would not be accurate. And let me also put out the thing that gets lost in this debate. The reason that you have discrepancies is because sin taxes, for example, alcohol, cigarettes, etc. Those obviously disproportionately hit lower incomes harder, not because they use more, but because they're paying a higher percentage of their, if someone smokes a pack a day, right, and you're paying $3 taxes, which is about what it is on those cigarettes, that's going to be a lot more money to somebody who makes $20,000 a year versus someone who makes $100,000 a year.
And then we have to spend
Does that make
$500,000
sense?
to keep that person healthy or
Right,
alive
right.
because of what the cigarettes
So if
do
you
to
take
them.
the sin taxes out of the mix, the numbers change again dramatically. The tax rate on that as you go up is high currently on high income earners. So I'm not even going to argue the job creator and that, because we've talked about that to death, that people run things through their tax return. But you have to be fair about looking at this. And in order to actually equalize things like Dayton is talking about, you have to raise high income earners' income taxes, because that's the only way they can hit them. You'd have to add 50%. I mean, they have a 50% tax increase.
I don't think it's nearly that high.
Well, it's
but
pretty
from what I've
high.
seen.
It's pretty high. And so that's why you have this, because property taxes, again, you can only have so big of a house. Okay, so if you make $5 million a year, you're not going to live in $1 billion house.
You're the wrong person
So-
to talk about
well,
that.
I don't
Since you moved to Delwood,
Well, I don't make $5 million a year, never have. So, but that's the difference, and that's why you have this. And so Dayton is trying to use income taxes to make up for, frankly, sin taxes and property taxes.
to make up for what Palenti did by slapping it on property owners and making their property taxes go up for people who could least afford it, people with fixed incomes, elderly, and
Well,
they
but-
went up and up and up under your
Now we're
friend,
going to get into the whole LGA.
under Dim Tim, and
Now we're going to get into the whole LGA thing. Property taxes have gone
we've
up.
only got a minute and a half left. So.
They've gone up, true, but they've gone up not that much higher than the rate of growth, but they have gone up, and that's true.
Quickly,
Yes.
Citizens United, do you think it was a fair case or not? By the same people who gave us George W. Bush.
I don't even know what Citizens United was. I should know this.
A corporation can vote as, can
Oh,
act as
that
an
one.
individual.
Ludicrous
or
I
not?
don't, yeah, I don't buy it. So I'll
Okay.
just, and I know it's.
Does,
I don't think a corporation.
Does
is
the
an
president
individual.
deserve credit for getting bin Laden?
Absolutely, good for him, and he did it the right way too.
He certainly did.
Absolutely.
And
Yep.
we got a
And I know that people on the left are not happy about it, but
I'm very happy
Are ya?
about it.
Good,
That's
'cause I
There's
am
a
too.
face that's
Yeah.
gone from this earth that's responsible for killing
I have a
thousands and
newfound
thousands of
respect
people.
for him with the military affairs, the
And
way
I've-
he's
and
handled
I've had
things.
questions
Yeah.
about some of the things that, choices that he's made, but I certainly felt that he made the right one there.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think Hillary Clinton has a lot of influence, and and I have a lot of respect for her.
Pat
handling of
Anderson,
things.
always a pleasure. I always enjoy jousting with you, and that you have the courage to come and on Access Democracy. You are welcome back here anytime.
Thanks, Ellen. It's good
Thank
to
you.
see ya.
support its employees, their families, and the Minnesota
Can we talk?
since 1872 by U.S. federal.
Mics are down, but they'll run the credits
There
through
we
us
go.
now.
We can talk.
Always
That was
fun.
quick. Was that a half an hour?
That was a half.